Welcome home, where we provide information, inspiration, and motivator after motivator after motivator here on America's Next. I have Angela Quijada Banks here with me today. How you doing, Ms. Banks?
I'm doing great. I'm so glad that I'm here, and I'm just excited to dive in.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let's do just that. Ladies and gentlemen, we have another great episode here for you today. I appreciate you liking and subscribing at our TV show page, America's Next Motivator. Also find us on YouTube, Instagram, download our platform, E360 TV, on Apple TV, Android TV, and Roku. Angela, I noticed it's not Angela, it's Angela. How was that about? How did that come about?
I love that you're asking me this question. So actually, my grandmother named me when I was younger, when I was first born, and it was Angela Quijada Banks. Unfortunately, because of my own, I would say, lack of pushback with other teachers and so many other people not pronouncing my name correctly, over time, I just kind of went with Angela. And it wasn't until 2017 when I started really diving into like my culture, indigenous culture, and African culture that I realized the importance of that. However, I will say in this season in life, I'm actually still going through like decolonization because a lot of that history comes up, of recognizing where we come from, where our heritage is. And sometimes it can get mixed up with colonized versions of our culture and our spirituality and things like that. So I'm actually still in a weird place with my name, but that's kind of how it has come to be. And yeah, that's what I'm working with right now.
You know, right out the gate, what I hear you talking about lets me know that you're in a courageous place. In fact, you're in the right place, and that's America's Next Motivator. If we can take a couple steps back and start from an earlier point in your life, where were you born and raised?
So that's actually two separate answers. I was born in Anaheim, California, but I actually traveled back and forth from the East Coast to the West Coast all throughout my years. And even now as an adult, I find myself still going East Coast and West Coast. But initially it was like not necessarily my choosing. Okay. And so, I've kind of been raised all over, I would say, of America.
All right. And I mean, what caused all the moving around?
Honestly, I think like looking back at it, because I've done a lot of like reflection and like, why did these things happen, on different perspectives. Mm-hmm. It was more so like my parents were not getting along with each other. They had very toxic ways of communicating, or lack of communication skills. So a lot of whatever trauma they went through in their life, they weren't able to communicate or process. And unfortunately, it led to a lot of separation and then coming back together. And so there was a lot of like, for me, like transitioning, consistent transitioning always. And that kind of became my normal, and moving, from the East Coast to the West Coast, and one with my dad, and then another time with my mom, and then with my grandmother or whoever. Right. Member.
Right. Now, are you an only child, or do you have brothers and sisters too?
So I'm blessed to have siblings. I grew up with 4 of my siblings, but as I've been going through my journey, I actually have found that I have over 12 siblings, all over. Yeah. So it is a journey, but that is what's going on. I'm not the only child.
And that's a blessing when you find out that you have more brothers and sisters.
Yes.
Yeah. So talk to me about your early childhood. Where did you go to school? What was school like? What type of kid were you? Were you a tomboy? I want you to pull out your paintbrush, and I want you to paint a picture for me of your early childhood.
I got you. Okay. So, um, some of my earliest memories is really like being kind of feeling confused. When I was really younger, like 6 or 7, I remember just feeling like I really wasn't sure what was going on in the world. However, like I had infinite possibilities. Actually, at that age, I was more tomboyish. I wanted to be a mad scientist. So if that tells you anything, I wanted to be a mad scientist. I always carried like a thick encyclopedia. All my family knew that if my birthday was coming around, I would want like a microscope or a
Yep.
telescope or things like that, or maybe a new notebook or puzzles. So I was very much like putting things together, pull them apart. What does it mean? Very analytical, even as a child.
Right, right. Okay. And were there any conversations about what's going on in our community? What was happening around you? What were the types of conversations that were molding your mind at that young age?
I would say like within my family. So I was on my mother's side of the family, more so around my grandparents. So like my grandfather and my grandmother. And those types of conversations were very interesting. Like I would learn from my grandmother. We would have late night conversations, or she would like sing to me different songs that her family and her mom would sing to her. But as I have gotten older and kind of like learned from those things, kind of decoding it almost, I learned that like my grandmother went through a lot of colonizing situations. For instance, like she used to talk about having nuns, hitting her on her hands or making sure that she was dressed a certain way, and very like strong hardships. And the same thing with my grandfather. And I remember like feeling bad and not really knowing like what to say when I was younger. Like, that's terrible, but I don't know what to do. I don't know how to make that better. And so those are kind of some of the conversations in school. I actually started learning more about like race and African history and stuff like that in 3rd grade. And from there, that's kind of where I started like molding and kind of learning more about like what my identity was and what it is. But that's kind of where it started. And unfortunately, with my parents, there wasn't much of a conversation around there. It was more so, I would say, the effects of, colonization and trauma and things like that.
Right. When you said that you were decoding some of the conversations that you were having with your grandmother, I thought that was really, really big. Can you give me an example of a conversation where your grandmother told things to you that you later went to decode?
Yeah. So an example would be like I said, in her school life. And for instance, my grandmother would talk about like that she lived in an adobe hut, and it was made of mud, and she and her father came together to make this. And I remember thinking to myself, well, in school I'm learning about Aztecs, and Aztecs do this. So like, what does that mean that you are, and you're saying you're Mexican, but in the book this says that Aztecs do this, and they're extinct. So coding some of that was knowing my history and knowing the history of like my family's lineage and the culture that she was expressing to me, and saying like, oh, my great grandfather, her father, taught her about herbs and medicine and the different properties of that. And then, with her, she learned Spanish and other things and had to learn English to come to this country. But she still had certain remembrances of this other language that her father was teaching her. And so, like, I had to go back to that, and it made me question, like, what was that language? Why was he practicing, with herbs, all these different things? And now I know it's because we were indigenous and we came from a certain tribe. But at that time, I had no idea. I just knew of this, Mexican and Aztec, and I had to kind of bridge the gap between the two.
When you say that, first of all, congratulations to you for decoding conversations that you were having with your elders, because they might not always say it plain, but when you take what they give you and unpack it, you find out what they're really trying to say.
Right.
And so when you say that you discovered that your lineage was indigenous, can you educate me on what does it mean to be indigenous, and why is that significant?
Yes. So there are so many different, tribes and groups of people that fall under indigenous, just like with African or even the umbrella term Black, right? So indigenous is meaning specifically indigenous to this land, meaning that this culturally, historically, is mine and my ancestors' land. We were here before colonization, and unfortunately, and even in Mexico, and unfortunately, millions of us, of my people, were slaughtered, and that kind of is the whole premise behind that, and that's what I would say. And indigenous, I think, is difficult to understand sometimes, though, because you may believe that you're one specific identity. For instance, a lot of people think they're Hispanic, or they are there's another word for it as well, Latinx. And what we come to realize when we do the research and we do the history for some of us that identify under these terms is that we're in fact not. And instead, we are adopting certain colonized terms, because for us to even speak Spanish as indigenous people would mean that we were colonized at some point. That is how we started to learn Spanish. So for some of us, so that is kind of the premise of that, is having to understand where we come from and bridge the gap between what our ancestors were trying, or even our grandparents, as close as that, were trying to express to us about what they went through.
Mm-hmm. And so, what I also hear you saying is that the original language of your ancestors was changed into something else. Do you think that language change caused communication issues later on down the line when it came to, let's say, your parents?
Yes, and I think, because this is one side of my family that I'm speaking about currently, because the other side is of African descent,
Mm-hmm.
I think it can be complex, especially because, like, for instance, my mother never taught me Spanish. So for several reasons, it was always like, don't speak this language because you're not going to be accepted. And that's also because of something, her personal story, what she went through. However, in the same token, she was able to have that relationship with my grandmother as the only one who was really speaking Spanish, like in the family.
Mm-hmm.
So none of my aunts or uncles speak Spanish, and my grandfather, her husband, doesn't speak Spanish. So
Right.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. And also, when I said, was there dysfunction as a result of changing the language? What I'm saying is, like, if just a generation ago, my family was speaking Spanish, but today we're speaking English. What I'm thinking is, what if you're feeling Spanish, but you're trying to communicate it in English, which is leading to frustration and then leading to dysfunction? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, so I look out. I look out for those sorts of things as well. When I look at the changes that we've had culturally over the decades, and I look at the dysfunction that we have today, do we? And I'm speaking for a little bit of everybody. Have issues simply because you're treating me like a dog when I'm actually a lion.
Mm.
Does that make any sort of sense to you?
Yeah, it definitely does. I think so. I think that sometimes, and I can speak to, the foster care community or even people of color. I think sometimes, with the preface of knowing, oh, this person has experienced childhood trauma, and I see it all the time. It's like, we'll set the bar this high, and maybe even lower, and great, you made it. And the bar doesn't go higher. It's the way people can speak to you. Sometimes it's the way people can perceive you. And I think that that's something that needs to change for sure.
Yeah. And so early in your life, you were trying to find out who you really were. I think that that's great because you know, the earlier you become who you really are, the sooner you can get on to your real maturation process, the sooner you can step into the real spiritual shoes that you're here to walk in. So then how did that affect your lens, let's say going into the 5th grade? Well, 6th grade. How did it affect your lens at that point?
Going into 6th grade, wow. Well, at that point, honestly, I had a lot of, like I said, back and forth of traveling. And I hadn't really seen large groups of people of color. When I was younger, like I said, 6 and 7 years old, I was surrounded mainly by quote unquote Mexican and Caucasian people. And so at the same time that I'm getting this information, right, that like African descent people endured these types of hardships, I was still navigating, well, I kind of look this way or whatever it is. And so, you know, how do I really show up in the world? And when it came to 6th grade, it was like, okay, I'm seeing, at this point I was also on the East Coast. And on the East Coast, there's more people of color, specifically North Carolina. And I remember that I was really excited to see more people that look like me. And I felt very connected. Unfortunately, as soon as I got to 6th grade, I moved also back to California. Like I said, it was a back and forth thing all the time.
I mean, how did you keep your balance? You're constantly moving across the country.
I didn't. I didn't keep my balance. I think after a time, I felt like there was no way I could really root into anything like family, friends. And I think over time, I just started to have this detachment from people because I didn't want to keep crying anymore. You know, I didn't want to move to the next place and I'm upset because I didn't even get to say goodbye. Sometimes, you know, I was moved and I didn't even get to say goodbye. I didn't even get to say like, hey, I'm leaving. It was an abrupt situation.
Wow.
So it took a long time also, like even now, for me to have relationships where I recognize this is long term, you know, and this is even before foster care. So yeah, that's kind of how it showed up.
Yeah. Can you talk to a young person out there right now, or not too long ago? They've been moving place to place, just like you were moving place to place. You're obviously beyond that now. Can you provide some encouragement to them?
Yeah, I would say, you know, life is a journey, and I don't know your particular circumstance of why you're moving back and forth or why your family is choosing for you to be moved back and forth. But, you know, home is not necessarily a destination. It's not a place. It's a thing. It's an experience within yourself. And you can find home wherever you are. Just look within you, follow the signs. For me, I used to have different numerology as signs. So like the number 14, I would ask, you know, the universe, God, to reveal number 14 to help me stay clear on my path. And so I would invite you to do the same. Know who you are and keep being led by that light.
Yeah. You know, I've read the Bible, and it talks about how children will be moved and moved and moved and moved, particularly into nations where they're not originally from. And so, as I see you almost looking at yourself in a similar light, I'm looking for the divine guidance in your life. And I'm sure that divine guidance is going to show itself in just a few moments here. Can you talk to me about when you went into foster care and why did you go into foster care, respectfully?
Yes. So I went into foster care when I was 16 years old. And I went into foster care due to neglect and abuse.
Okay. What was it like when you went into your first foster home?
So my first foster home was actually a kinship placement, and so I was with my family um, on one of my parents' side, and unfortunately, it did not work out because he was not, he meaning my uncle, he was not in the right frame of mind, I believe, to be able to take care of five young people
Yeah.
with the background of extensive trauma.
Right. Right. And how were your brothers and sisters behaving at this time? Were they upset? Were they not really knowing what was going on? How was life for them?
I think we were all in shock. It was a lot. It was, a decision that we all collectively had to make even before, like, whether or not we were going to continue in the life that we were living, which was very close to all of us wanting to end our lives, or to decide that there had to be another way. So,
Wow.
so yeah.
Okay. So there has to be another way. Was your mindset? Did you start writing? Did you start talking to counselors, therapists? What did you start to do?
So for me, I've always been writing. I've done, dancing. I've done swing dancing. I've done different art forms, painting, and other things to relieve myself of, pain and things like that.
Yeah.
So I was doing a little bit of that. I was just getting started, I think, into therapy, and I didn't have a really great therapist, so that really wasn't something that I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm. So you were internalizing all this trauma and the pain of moving around. You've left your family, but then you have this seed planted that you have a greater identity that you're not even able to really live nor be acknowledged as. As you continue to harbor all those different feelings, I mean, what? How did you get through that?
I would say, ever since I was younger, I always had this like idea or inner knowing that I was meant for something greater. I remember I would tell my dad, and even my mom sometimes, like, I don't understand why we're going through this. Like, we were in intense poverty situations, like, being in a 1 bedroom hotel and there's 8 of us,
Mm-hmm.
and just sharing one sandwich of bologna, of
Mm-hmm.
a microwave bologna sandwich or microwave rice. So I would ask those, like, why are we in these situations? Like, I have things I need to do, and we would go into that, like, what is it you need to do? And I'm like, I have to tell my people about who they are. Like, it was weird because it's almost a paradox of like halfway not really being in the moment and knowing, having this inner knowing that like there was another, even though it wasn't realistic, right? And that's also why I don't tell people to be realistic, because if you follow an idea of realism, then that may actually shrink your vision. And I think it needs to be broadened, especially in very unfortunate and trying times. So I would say, I personally was just continuously um, the choices in love versus the choices rooted in fear. And I
Mm-hmm.
think sometimes that's difficult. And I've definitely had my fair share of mess ups, but constantly picking myself back up and saying, you know what, that didn't work out, but there's a tomorrow. And what do I really want to create? What kind of life do I really want to create for myself? And how do I take that first step, whether that's today or tomorrow?
I've had conversations with people about some of the conditions that young people live in here in America, and they'll start talking about the way that people live in other countries. And correct me if you disagree, but we've got people living here in America in some deplorable conditions. Like you said, 8 people living in a one-room hotel. I mean, you wouldn't think that that was going on in America, but it is. It was you.
Yeah,
It was you.
yeah.
What do you think about people who they go foster care, adoption, international. Should they streamline that fast, or do they need to really realize that young people right here in America are dealing with at least some second world conditions if you really pay attention?
Yeah, I always believe in like staying home and taking care of home first, right? And so, like, if we are people in America, I think that we need to focus on the issues in America before we are definitely going out and going into international. And that doesn't mean to say that what is happening internationally is more of a deficit or not, but I think that we have to focus on home and focus on where we're at so that way we can alleviate these issues. America has several issues, just like any other country.
Mm-hmm.
And so we must focus on those issues first. And those young people that are needing a home, needing a family, needing support, I think before we go out into other, of course, to each their own, but that's just what I think.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just that, Angela, I've been in some barbershop conversations where people don't believe that there's 8 people in a hotel room in America. They don't. And so I see a need to continue to raise awareness about the things that are really happening in our communities.
Yeah.
So, Angela, we're getting a lot of love in the building so far, and I think that you have a very graceful soul. People are here to support you and I want to acknowledge some of them. Matt Anderson, I see you in the building. Tamisha Macklin, Ani Keene Riley, Jeffrey Bunn, Tony Contini, Calvin Polk, Alicia Best, Yolanda Riley. We see you all out there. We appreciate you contributing to the conversation. Me personally, I think that Angela is making some very, very profound points today, and she's doing it in a nice, calm, collective manner right here on this Monday evening. Now, what do you think? What do you think that we can do to continue to raise awareness about the realities of young people here in foster care in America?
I think that we can listen. I think that we can. I don't think that there's one solution. I think that there's multiple things that have to be done to alleviate the situation. Just kind of like, when you deal with the flu, you can't just sleep it off.
Right.
You have to be proactive and take care of the back end of things. And I think that's the approach that we need to take is listening and also actively doing things. I think there's a lot of talk, and that's what's frustrating to me. I've been in a lot of, conventions and banquets, and, we all dress up and everything's nice. But if we're talking about 20 years of a conversation, 30 years of a conversation, we need to start really focusing more so on the actions, listen and apply, and then, move forward from that. What is working, what isn't working, and just keep moving forward with that. But that's what I would say.
To that end, are there any initiatives out there that you'd like to raise awareness about? Anything out there that you feel is worth knowing in the national foster care child welfare community right now?
I would say all of the young people that are advocates already. I think that they're doing incredible work as far as in the political realm, and those that are sharing their stories through whether that's a book, whether that's a podcast, whether that is music, whatever it is. And I think not only do we need the voices of young people in foster care who are directly affected, but we also need the other constituents. We need foster parents sharing their stories. We need CASAs, garden ad litem, social workers, case managers. I think the more that we have a more broad perspective of what's going on in foster care, I think that it will be more beneficial, and it'll create a clear vision of how we can move forward in the future.
Sure. I think, I already think the world of the things that you're saying. I'm excited to see what you're going to say after the break. I believe that young people between the ages of 16 and 25, I think that they're running the world. I think that our next great minds have their gears turning right now. Our next great writers have their pen moving right now. And
Yeah.
I'm excited to see what's coming next from you after this brief message. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for being here. We'll be right back with Angela Banks. America's Next Motivator. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern. Tuesday and Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern. America's Next Motivator, hosted by me, Cedric Riley, and sponsored by the Pride Empowerment Network. Welcome back. Angela, how you feeling out there?
Feeling great. Just got a sip of water and I'm here.
Yeah, and we still got more people pouring into the building. Eric Lee Warner says, uplifting others. Great job. Jennifer McClafferty says, you're an inspiration. Listen, I think you are doing your thing. So, and people obviously know who you are, which is phenomenal. Let's get to it. What is your philosophy in life? What's your philosophy?
I think that I have ever evolving definitions and really philosophies also on what I'm very much moldable. Like I will move in a way that will be best beneficial to what I'm trying to achieve. And that doesn't necessarily mean that like my core values change. I root in my core values. However, I think that it's important to be flexible, especially in life, because you just never know. And from my experience, going back and forth from different states, even before foster care, I think that's what really kept me there, was recognizing that, you know, one, I don't have all the answers and I'm okay with that. And two, I can't do it alone. Like, I think that you really need a community. You need people that are going to surround you and love you and care for you and celebrate you and cry with you, you know, even if that's what you need.
Yep.
So that's what I would say to that.
Can you talk to me about the importance of cultural competence, not only in our communities? Before you ever even go into foster care, we need cultural competence, but in a regimented place like the child welfare sector, can you talk to me about the importance of cultural competency?
Yeah, of course. So I think that when you don't know, one, where you've come from, if you don't understand certain aspects of your identity, that it can be difficult to relate to, one, yourself. I think the most important relationship that you can have is with yourself. And sometimes it's difficult to navigate that, especially as a person of color, because we come through this one perspective, right, of his story, history. And that plays a big role in what you identify as your culture. Mm-hmm. And some people decide that, you know, we don't want to identify what our culture is anymore. Like our new culture is that I'm just American, I'm not indigenous, I'm not African. It doesn't matter how much you look at or are a part of it or anything. Some people shed that, and I think that that's their own narrative, however they want to do it. But I think making sure, especially that those resources and that community is available, especially in foster care, because you're already taken away from your birth family. And that can be, for good reasons or not for good reasons, for like poverty reasons. I don't think that's the right way to handle it. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And we have a sort of question or something for you to evaluate, rather, from Calvin Polk. He says, being able to adapt to all types of situations is sometimes hard. What do you think about that? What do you think about that?
I agree. I think that it's extremely difficult, depending on your situation. For me, I had been, even at some point, in a cult, in a spiritual cult. And, at one point, I thought that I could, figure it out and do all these different, have all these different ways of getting out of it. But it wasn't until like I had to surrender to the fact that, again, I didn't know it all. And two, it was still possible to do it. It was still possible to relieve myself, whether that is of the situation that I was in before foster care, in the cult, like I said, or even out of foster care. It was possible. And I think one of the main reasons was because I started to familiar myself with people who were, giants to me. They were already doing it. They were already making it big, and they had a similar background to me. And it gave me that idea of like, they were able to do it with maybe even worse of a situation. So can I.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Sherry Wilmore says, foster care taught my sister and I how to adapt due to constant change.
Yeah.
I like that, Sherry.
Yep.
I like that. I like that because when you're moving around and you're thinking about surviving, you're thinking about becoming an adult, you're thinking about, I got a whole lot of things happening under the surface of this water, but best believe I'm going to be a duck just like the rest of them.
Right.
And then can you talk to me about the importance of involving the young people, the youth, the people who are going through all these different changes when we try to figure out what's the best way to go as an industry? What's the importance of involving the youth in those conferences, assemblies, and think tanks?
Yes. So in the advocacy world, we say nothing about us without us. And so,
wow.
Whenever you are doing anything, whether that is in, again, racial institutions, anything like that, foster care, I think is an imperative to hear from specifically the population that it is directly affected. Because otherwise, I mean, you could think that you know what someone or a group of people want. I'm pretty sure that when we go back to the previous conversation about colonization, that a lot of Europeans, you can even read in textbooks, the way their narrative is that they were saving people, they were helping people, and they were, even from their own savagery. So we have to be very cautious about the narrative that we are having within our minds and be more clear by directly asking and involving young people, which are the people that are directly affected in foster care, and the other constituents about what is actually the solution that is needed. Otherwise, you could create a further situation, further damage and trauma that won't be beneficial long term.
Mm-hmm. Now, have you created any solutions to help out in the direction that you're talking about?
Yes, I would say like with the support of congressional members, political officials, and other young people that are in the fight as well. Hashtag Foster Youth Voices. Just can throw that one out. But yes, I've passed some legislation in North Carolina with Senator Behringer. I've connected with Senator Karen Bass, who's in Los Angeles. and several others, House Representative Mark Walker in 16th District of North Carolina, and several others to collaborate on legislative pieces so that way it can become law for young people's voices, resources, supports, and other ways that success can be at the forefront.
Mm-hmm.
Recently, I started a podcast called Soulful Liberation, and it is where we empower foster youth by day and break generational curses by night.
Wow.
Yes, and so that has been incredible. I want to uplift the voices and the art forms of storytelling of young people in foster care.
You know, I see you as a leader in a social movement that is child welfare, that is foster care focused. And I see you as somebody that young people will read about in the future, somebody who stepped up to the plate, impacted legislation, joined teams with organizations like Foster Youth Voices, Foster Club. I know that Matt Anderson is very active out there and made a difference. You know, and you sound so modest, but I think that the things that you're doing is absolutely huge. So everybody, right there where you are, I just want you to, give her a round of applause where you are. Put some likes in the building, put some hearts in the building, drop some comments like you guys have been doing, because she is the definition of going through some things, but being a positive agent of change all throughout that. Can you talk to me about what it was like partnering up with organizations? What were some of the organizations that you've partnered up with in the past, and who are you working with today?
So some noteworthy organizations that I'll share today are Say So, which is in North Carolina, and I think they really supported what I wanted to do, which was be more vocal about the things that I have educated myself in and, of course, experienced firsthand. And also the narratives of young people that are not in a place yet to speak up for themselves. And so that was one organization. Another one I would say is, what was it called? National Foster Youth Institute. Yes. And that is an organization that is, I think, collaboration with Senator Karen Bass. And so that one was a huge impact on my hope for the success of young people in foster care, and that our voices really do matter. Mm-hmm. With the National Foster Youth Shadow Day program in Washington, D.C. And that was a huge moment for me back in 2016 and 2017.
Ms. Banks, this place right here is made for you. This platform, America's Next Motivator, is made for you. It's made for all of the young voices, the young adult voices, the adult voices of organizations like Say So, National Foster Youth Organizations. All of those constituents are welcome here to talk about your agenda, to talk about your philosophy, to let the world know who you are, what you are, and where you've been. That's what we're here for. And I appreciate you for stepping up to the plate. Now, we were talking in pre-production, and you also mentioned that you wrote a handbook. Can you talk about that handbook?
Yes, I wrote the Black Foster Youth Handbook, which will be available in 2 weeks.
Wow.
September 29th, and it's 50 plus lessons that I learned to successfully age out of foster care and holistically heal. A little bit about that is, going through my own experiences, I knew that I wasn't quite ready to write a memoir because, that's a lot of energy, time, and space. I want to just give all my love to everyone that has written memoirs already. I'll be there one day. But at this point in time, this handbook is for young people of all races, of all ethnicities, to really learn that they can transmute their pain to not only power, but in purpose. And I think that when you really recognize that there is a calling on your life far bigger than anything you've already experienced, any pain, any, situation that has happened, then it really aids you in the understanding of why exactly you went through things. One of the most common things I always hear is like, you went through this because people are only given things that they can handle. And I can agree to that. However, I think you go through situations so that way you can change at even 5% of that situation for the people that are coming behind you. I
Wow.
think that we have to continuously recognize our own life, but also make sure that we're reaching back and helping someone else out of those same situations.
Absolutely. There's an artist. His name is Gilbert Young. He has a famous portrait of one man pulling another man up over the wall, and that came to mind when you just said that. Sherry Wilmore says, "Telling your story takes time. I'm glad you are self-aware, and that now is not the time." And I agree with her because I just feel it through the screen that some of your biggest accomplishments are still yet to come. You know. Um, so where can people find your Black Foster Youth Handbook if they want to purchase it and they want to read it? How can they find it?
Yes, so it is available for pre-order right now at www.blackfostercareyouthhandbook.com.
Okay. Incredible. Incredible. They're gonna run out there, they're gonna break your website. Everybody's gonna be looking for it.
Yes, it is available for pre-order right now until the day of September 29th. So it's at 40% off. So definitely, if you haven't, go ahead and get your copy now. The prices will be going up.
How did you write that? I mean, what was your process?
So I started writing that in February. I think it just was like I'm a writer. I write all the time. I actually started doing a blog on Instagram, and before that, I was vlogging. So I think like it was just a compilation of things that felt natural. Like it was a gradual movement. Initially, in 2016 is when I got the idea, and it was called something a little bit different, but I knew pretty much what the outcome I wanted it to be. So I reached out to a few organizations, and unfortunately they didn't really see my vision, and that's okay because it wasn't given to them. And so I think I was just trying to figure out how I was going to do it. I never self-published a book because I'm doing it a self-published route. And
Okay.
so I just didn't know what even that entailed. It just seemed like a big thing that I just couldn't even like how do I even start? I know I want to do this, I want to get it out, but how do I even start? So I started like binge watching YouTube videos, honestly. And I started talking to other people that have written books. However, I didn't really know a lot of people that have written books.
Right.
So I really didn't get that much information. And so I would say this year was really the year after I got married last year and moved out here to San Diego. It was like the perfect space because I had really minimal things that I really had to do. And I recognized that, okay, also there's several books that I want to write. And I had to just kind of like narrow down which one felt the most that I was called to at the time. And from there, I started kind of being more public about it to keep myself accountable.
Yep.
And I had to recognize there were certain skills that I didn't have. Like I didn't have very strong self-discipline. So I needed to fine tune that before I even said anything or posted anything. I knew that I had to get myself right with that. Otherwise, I could say something and then still not perform in that way. And I didn't want to be that. I told myself, you know what, I'm not going to be that type of person. I'm going to be a person that is of my word. So if I say something, I'm going to do it. And I had to really, I think over the couple of years as well, just push myself to be very keen on certain skills in order to reach the level of success that I wanted for myself and I defined for myself.
Yeah. Can you give us one tip from the book? I know there's 15 of them. Can you share it? Can you just share one with us today?
So there's 50, yes. And
Oh, 50. I'm sorry.
yeah, so I will share it just like right at the front of my brain, so I'll say it. Which is and there's also a mug that I gave out, and it's mind your own business. And that comes from the premise of like sometimes we get so caught up on what other people think about us or what other people, are saying about us, and it might not be right. But what we have to really be focused in instead is really our own selves and the picture that we want to create for ourselves, the legacy we want to leave behind for ourselves. And I think like a lot of times we're not focused enough on our own business, on our own selves. And, I used to say like, oh, why is this person always up in my Kool-Aid, right? Why is somebody always up in my business? And it's like, at the end of the day, I didn't have a business for anybody to be talking about anyway. So I had to get my business together first, right? And so that's a lesson that I will share today.
I mean, believe it or not, I think that's actually a huge lesson. It's an applicable lesson, and sometimes it's a tough pill to swallow. Like, hey, I need to mind my own business. But then, because you're offering leadership when you say mind your own business, can you take a few seconds to explain to us what that business entails?
Do you mean my business as in my actual business or?
No, 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 no. Like anybody. So, sometimes people can take your comment on face value and understand what you're saying. But then some people, there's always somebody going to say, well, what do you mean by that?
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Okay.
I have to be objective and not assume that anybody knows what you mean when you say mind your business. So what is that business? What is it? I mean, you want me to give an example?
Sure.
Yeah. So I would think like if I was if you walked up to me right now and told me to mind my business and I wasn't going to take it offensively,
yeah.
I would be thinking, what sorts of investments am I making right now? Catch up. What does my savings account look like right now? Catch up. How are you progressing in a virtual age? Catch up. Those sorts of things.
Yeah. So yeah, in a practical way, then yeah, I would say, recognizing, are you being in alignment to your purpose? Are you being in alignment to what you say that you want to do? If you're always saying like, I want to start a business, right? And that's your business. And you're not doing what you said you're going to do, even if it's like literally today that you go and research or you go purchase a book to get more clear on what it means to start a business. Mm-hmm. That would mean that you're being focused and mind your own business versus you're saying that, but then you're getting distracted by, comments on Facebook where someone, or you heard someone, she said, he said, whatever, said that, you still haven't had your business yet and blah, blah, blah. Like, right. That's not none of your business. You need to be focusing on your business.
Mm-hmm. What do you think it's going to take for you and for other young people to completely shoot out into space and reach the top of the mountaintop? What do people need to do to get to the highest level of, being the best they can be? What can people do to really get past mediocrity, really get past just being a regular person that's not doing much? What can they do?
Well, first, I want to say that everyone has their own definitions of success, and you can define that for yourself. As far as like being a better person every day, I would say just self-reflecting and being honest with yourself. I think sometimes that's the most difficult thing to start with, because sometimes we all want to paint a good picture of ourselves, right? Yep, Our ego gets very attached to certain ideas of who we are, but sometimes we have to take a step back and really look to the future and say like, okay, I really haven't been, honest with myself. I really haven't been showing up and giving 110% like I said I would, or I said I am. And, what does that really look like for me in my levels of success? really do that, to really get started.
Absolutely. You know, I believe that some people, they go through life without ever giving 100%.
Right.
And so I think we can all take that and apply it. Make sure that you give 100%. And in the words of Angela Quijada Banks today, give 110%. 110%. My last question for you today is, what is greatness to you?
Greatness is recognizing your commitment or lack thereof to a better future, a better world, and taking part in it, having an active role in it. And as I said before, creating a legacy, giving back to the communities that you came from and that you maybe struggled through, and don't forget about them.
Very profound response. I think that you are creating a legacy. I want to let you know that I see the legacy that you're building. I will be looking for a copy of your Black Foster Youth Handbook. You know, I did an internship one time, and one of the biggest tips to it that we learned was, any position that you get into, you make a handbook for the other people who are going to be in that position in the future. So you're an all-star today. I want to let you know that I respect your journey. I respect your outlook on the future, and that you, Angela Quijada Banks, is America's next motivator.
Hey!
Hey! That's right. Thanks for being here, okay?
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. I'll talk to you soon. Peace. Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Each and every episode of America's Next Motivator will have something for you. All you've got to do is stop by and pick it up.